There are so many pieces to language arts. Spelling, reading, writing, phonics, grammar, punctuation, paragraph structure, literary techniques, elements of story, poetry, literary devices. It's pretty endless. But unless you're looking at homeschooling long term, you don't have to worry about covering them all. Some people would prefer to buy a curriculum because it can seem daunting to keep track of it. I'm going to show you an easier way for short-term homeschooling. Let's look at handwriting. You can buy a special book for it, but it's not necessary. There are hundreds of free handwriting pages to be found online. Personally, I just make my own by hand because it takes me less time than finding what it is that I'm looking for. So when you are teaching handwriting, you want to focus on following the stroke patterns. So I'll show them the letter B. And I'll say you start at the top, you go down, you pick your pencil up and go around. I like to draw number 1 and number 2 arrows to remind them in what order you do that. Then I give them 1 dashed copy and 4 or 5 starting spots. The starting spots are really good for reminding them where to start, because if you don't do that, then they're probably going to forget and then they'll be learning their letters the wrong way. If your student is having trouble doing this without guidance, here's a nifty trick that I picked up. You can use markers or highlighters. So you write it out in one color. So I wrote it out there in yellow. And then you give them a different color and they trace over it as best they can. So I'm going to use a blue, and then that turns mine green. And they think that's really cool. It's self-checking and they feel really good about it. Now, if they're really struggling, I'd suggest talking about letters living in a treehouse. There's actually a handwriting book called A Reason for Handwriting, but I don't think that you really need the whole book. Basically, it's just imagining that there's a little treehouse and you can think of how the letters go in that. So like the letter G, it lives in the main part of the treehouse and its tail hangs down on the ladder. So if they're having trouble figuring that out, then that's one way. If your kid is having a hard time keeping on lines, you can buy special paper that actually has little ridges, but you could also just take glue the night before and make a strip. I've never really needed to do that. If they can't keep between the lines, then they're probably just not ready for handwriting. So here's a packet that I made for my son when we were studying dinosaurs. I just made this on Word, drawing in the lines and adding in clip art, and then I hand wrote marking the starting points. And this probably took me quite a while to put together initially, just because I didn't have a lot of practice about using Word. I'll show you in another video about faster ways to do it on PowerPoint, but that's just the best I could do at that time. And it was cumulative, so that way when he got to the later ones, it would use the letters that he already knew. And I just thought this was nice because it tied in with what he was interested in. You could also have them start out just writing their names every day and then switch to your address and then have them write the date, including the month, because those ones are really hard words sometimes to learn how to spell. But once they're comfortable with smaller lines, you could just switch them over to a notebook or a spiral and put in some words for them to practice. I like to also include sentences when they're older, so that way they can practice spacing between words, and you can remind them, 1 finger space between words before they get started, or if they're having trouble with that. So for printing, I think that the order that you teach letters doesn't matter a whole lot. You could teach them in alphabetical order, or you could teach them with letters that have the like starting points. So like a B starts at the top and then goes around. You could also do the L, K starts at the top. So you could teach like all those ones together. Just think about where those letters start. But either way, it's not going to matter in the long way. You just want to make sure that they're doing the strokes in the right way, so that way later on when they have to learn cursive, that they are already ready for that. So I like to teach capital and lowercase letters together, just so that way they can really know which ones go together. So there you have it. It's not a big deal and it's pretty easy.